Hey everybody, welcome to Home Recording Made Easy and Mix Tip Tuesday, where every Tuesday I show you a new mixing tip to help you make more professional sounding mixes in your home studio. Before we get to this week's tip, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Make sure you hit that notification bell and also stick around till the end of the video, because at the end of the video I have something I want to give you absolutely free that's really going to help you with your mixing training, so be sure to stick around. Okay, everybody, welcome. So in this episode of Mix Tip Tuesday, we are going to talk about parallel compression, and specifically in this particular episode, parallel compression on drums, which is where it's most commonly used. In future Mixing Tip Tuesday episodes, we will also do parallel compression on all the instrumentation and show you how that can really enhance your mix. But this time we're going to talk about it on drums. So what is the concept of parallel compression and why do we use it? Okay, so if you watched last week's Mix Tip Tuesday, where we talked about control compression, and if you didn't, link will be in the description box below. Before you kind of watch this video, you may want to go watch that one first, or you can watch it after this. It really doesn't matter. But we talked last week about using our channel strip here to do controlled compression on all of our drums. And we talked about doing it on all of our tracks, but to keep this video short, we just talked about drums. And the reason why we do controlled compression is we do compression on all the individual drums in a very light amount of way, a couple of dB of compression, so we can retain the dynamics of the drum kit in this particular case. What we're going to do this week is we're going to use parallel compression on those drums to now do the exact opposite of what we did last week, where we're going to over compress our drums, that a lot more punch, a lot more thickness, and a lot more crack and life to our drum kit without it sounding overly compressed, because we're only going to use a very small dose of the parallel compression track. So let me show you how we set this up and I'll explain. So here's our drum kit down here in brown. Kick, sub kick, snare, top, bottom, hats, tom 1, 2, a ride cymbal mic, an overhead mic, and a room mic. All of those have a compressor on them. We're using the SSL channel strip, as I just said, where we did some control compression last week's episode. All of those are being routed, are going to be routed to our drum bus, okay, which is down the other end of the console. We don't need to worry about that. This purple track next to it, I labeled P drums. P standing for parallel compression drums, okay? And on that track, we're using an 1176 compressor. Again, you can use any compressor for this, but this is I typically like to use an 1176 style. This one is made by Waves, a CLA 76, but you can use any of them, where we're going to have a very fast release and a very slow attack, and we're going to go what's called the all buttons mode on this particular thing. And what we're trying to do is we're going to over compress all the drum tracks. So I'm going to set this up with a release and attack like this. We're going to use the all buttons mode on this, which is kind of an 1176 trick to kind of put it more into limiting mode. Okay, we're going to set up our compressor here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send all of the close mics via the send to this parallel track. So let me show you. So on the kick mic, we're going to come over here to send, and we're going to go over to P drums, and it's always going to be pre-fader. And on Studio One, you just click on this little symbol here and it turns it to amber, and that's pre-fader. The blue is post fader. Depending on your DAW, you can just, there may be a different way to flip it from pre to post. You want to do a pre-fader, so no matter what you do to the mix with the output channel fader on this kick drum as you're mixing, it doesn't affect what's going on with the send level. Super important. So you always want it to be pre-fader. Our send level, I'm going to set it to 0 dB. It defaults on Studio One to -6. I'm going to set it to 0 as a starting point. And I'm going to do that for all of my drums. So once again, we're going to go down to P drums, pre-fader, set it to 0. Now we're going to do this on our snare, top and bottom. We're going to do this on our hats and on our toms. Now, I don't typically always do these on overheads and rooms, almost never on rooms. It's mostly for the close mics, although you can experiment with your overhead mics and your room mics if you'd like. The other thing you want to do is you want to make sure on each one of these sends, if you've panned something like, let's say, the toms, you want to follow the panning on the send. So in this case, tom 1 is panned 29% to the right, to the left, so I'm going to move it 29% to the left on the send, and you can see it here on Studio One. It's this little fader or little slider here. It's very hard to see, but I'll try to zoom up in editing, but depending on your DAW, it might be a little different. On tom 2, which is a floor tom, we went 54% over to the right, so again, I'm going to drag that over. around 54%. Again, if it's slightly off, it's okay, but try to get it pretty close. 54. There we go. All the rest of the mics are dead up the center. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to solo up this drum kit here, just so you can hear the drums without the parallel compression. You can see the parallel compression track is all the way turned on and it's muted. So here's our regular drum sounds. Now, if I were to unmute the parallel track, and you don't hear it because the fader's turned down, and I open up our 1176, okay, right now, based on the input settings, we're already compressing about 10 dB, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to completely bury the needle and keep it there. I want to be somewhere between 10 and 20 dB of compression. Where it is exactly on the meter is not important. You just want to over compress it. So if this thing was turned way down here, the input, you can see there's no compression. I'm going to turn up the input, over compress it, make sure the output, you know, is there. Again, that's not really as important. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this fader up a little bit until I hear the kick and the snare kind of get a little bit more punchy. That's too much. I'm exaggerating it. Now if I were to mute this track, listen to the kick snare. You can hear how the snare gets a little bit more crack, sound a little more whack, and a little bit more punch in the kick drum. Now on its own, you may be like, okay, that's really no big deal. We really just made it a little bit louder, a little bit thicker. Where does this really become important? Where this really becomes important is when you bring the rest of your band in, which we're going to do here. Now this is not really a mix song. It's kind of a static mix with a couple of plugins on it that I've used for other episodes of Mix Tip Tuesday. So it's not a finished mix by any means. When we turn down the parallel track, listen to the whole mix here. Where the snare's not really cutting through too much, the kick is a little bit low in the mix. And you've ever had this problem where you kind of start off with your drums, you mix your drums, you mix your bass, you mix your percussion, you mix your guitars, you mix your organs, you mix your horns, you mix your vocals, you get all the faders up, and what started off in the beginning with a really slamming, nice punchy drum kit that cut through the mix, by the time you add all your instrumentation, you kind of lose the drums. Now, you can just take the drum faders and just turn them up a little bit, but this does more than that. This adds a little bit more thickness and a little bit more punch, over compressed, and we tuck it in right underneath the other tracks, not too much, just to get the drums to cut through a little bit more. And what this is going to do is it's going to retain all the dynamics of the original tracks, because the original tracks are a little louder and we only did controlled compression. Last week's episode, go watch it, link in the description box. And we're going to add a little bit more girth and a little bit more thickness with this P drums track. So here we go. So now with the whole band in, watch what happens when I bring this up. You're going to hear the drums get a little bit more in your face, and I'm going to take it away, and you're going to see how you lose it. So here we go. That's before, after. Before, after. Okay, so the track didn't get really any louder. It just got the drums to sit a little bit more forward, and there's a little bit more thickness, a little bit more punch to it. Okay, that's the trick with parallel compression. Now, what's really interesting, and we'll do this in a future episode of Mix Tip Tuesday. And by the way, if you really want to learn the real, why I choose certain compressors for the parallel tracks versus the regular tracks, and we really get down deep into the whole theory behind parallel compression, you want to check out The Power of Parallel Compression. Link will be in the description box, right? You can go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, pick up The Power of Parallel Compression. It was a webinar I did in 2019. We spent an hour talking about not only how to do this on drums, but how you do this on all the instrumentation to really add a whole nother level to your mix. It'll take your mix from an amateur sounding mix to a pro sounding mix, I promise. Go check out The Power of Parallel Compression. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to give you a little coupon code so you get a discount. So don't leave yet, okay? So think about this on drums, how much of a difference that makes. Now, if you did this on all the instruments, what it can do to your entire mix. Okay, now how much of this parallel track you bring in volume-wise is really up to you. My rule of thumb is I want to bring it into where I can really hear it get louder, the drums, and then I just tuck it back a little bit. So with the whole band in, here we go. Maybe a little too much. Bring it back a little. Mute it. Right? So you can really hear it cut through. Now, I typically only do this with the close mics. Now, you can also do this with the ride and the overheads if you like. You could do this if you want. We can listen to what that does. Again, right now they're panned right up the center. So let's listen to it when you also do the overheads and the ride cymbal, not the room. 4. Okay, so the overheads and the ride cymbal, you can do that as well. The thing I would caution you about that, and it totally depends on the song, is if you have a real heavy-handed drummer and there's tons of splashy cymbals going on throughout the mix, when you do this with the overheads, then what happens is that you're bringing up the parallel track to really get the kick drum, the snare, and the toms to really cut through, but then the cymbals become too harsh and they become a little bright. And also because you're picking up all the other drums, including the snare and the kick in the overhead mic, I tend to just do this with the close mics. But you can experiment with it. There's really no rules here. But the key to this whole trick is to use a compressor and to over-compress everything very heavily. Right? Whether you're using an 1176 or something else, it doesn't matter. The choice of compressor almost doesn't matter. But again, there is a method to the madness on why I choose these types of compressors and which ones I choose for which types of instruments. And that's all in the Power of Parallel Compression course I mentioned a few minutes ago. So go check that out. But again, if you just want to use a stock compressor, you can do that too. But you over compress it, then you just tuck this in from a volume perspective underneath the other tracks to give it a little more life and a little more girth. Don't overdo it, but that little subtlety is going to make a big difference. It's going to help things cut through the mix without having to turn up the faders and without having to turn up the high-end EQ, which is the tendency for a lot of people to do. They want more crack out of the snare. They go to the EQ on the snare and they boost the top end to get it to cut through. And when you do that on all your instruments, you tend to get a really harsh and kind of a brittle mix. So this will not only solve that problem, but it also will give you a little bit more bottom end, a little more thickness, and the mix will never sound muddy. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Mix Tip Tuesday. Now again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video. As I mentioned, I want to give you a couple of free gifts. The first gift I want to give you is I want you to go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. I want to give you 5 free mixing training courses. If you have not gone to homerecordingmadeeasy.com yet and got your 5 free courses, click the link in the description box today. Once you've done that, I also want to give you a coupon code. The coupon code again is in the description box. It is YouTube25. YouTube25 will give you a 25% discount off of all of my courses on homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Even the Power of Parallel Compression, which I mentioned in this video, which is something that I really encourage any beginner or intermediate mixer to check out. It's super affordable as it is, and 25% off. You get it for next to nothing. Go check that out today. Again, link in the description box. And if you missed last week's Mix Tip Tuesday, where we talked about controlled compression, I also talked to you about a course called Compression Made Easy. You want to use that as well in conjunction with the Power of Parallel Compression. And those 2 compression courses will change the way you think about compression, I promise. So go out to the website, go check that out. And finally, if you really want to learn the craft of mixing, you really enjoy this stuff and learning all these little mixing tips and different concepts and techniques and mixing workflows, if you like mixing music, then I highly suggest you check out mixingmadeeasy.net. It's a monthly mixing membership site where for less than 50 cents a day, you could be part of a community of mixers. We're all getting better at the craft of mixing, and every month you're going to get a new song to mix. We have mixing contests. There's a ton of free plugins I give away in studio gear. Go check out mixingmadeeasy.net. Again, all the links will be in the description box below. And also, I want you to let me know in the comments below, do you use parallel compression? Is this the first time you've ever heard of parallel compression? If you use it, how do you do it? Do you just do it on drums? Do you do it on all your instruments? What is your philosophy? How do you use parallel compression? And if you do not, go try it on your next mix and then report back in the comments below and let me know what you thought of it. And until the next video, I've been Dave with HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com, and I will see you next week for Mix Tip Tuesday. Take care.